Good morning. Good morning. This is Valerie Leonard. I am the founder of Nonprofit Utopia. We're the ideal community for emerging leaders who are looking to start, manage, and scale their nonprofits. I want to apologize. I am having technical difficulties and I'm not able at this point to show my face on screen, but that might not be a that might not be a bad thing. But at any rate, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us. If you are here, please type your name in the comments. Let us know who you are, where you're from. If you have had any experience helping nonprofits to stay in compliance, if you are working with an organization either as a board member or as an employee, and you might have some issues with compliance, and I'm pretty sure any of us does, because there are just so many issues that come into play here. As you know, it's that time of year. We are coming upon some nonprofits' fiscal year end. As we do this recording, it's June 11th, so I know people are furiously scrambling, trying to get ready for their fiscal year to end, right? And that means putting together your Form 990s, it means doing your audits, and a number of other year-end activities. And then, others of us will be doing the same kind of mad dash in September and October, and then others of us will be doing it in either December or March. So every time we approach a common fiscal year end, I'd like to, just let people know, um, what they should be doing. And in fact, compliance is something that we start from the moment that we start our organizations. We don't really think about it, but when you're doing things like your articles of incorporation, that's the very first step to nonprofit compliance. Any forms that you're filling out with the government, you are dealing with regulatory issues. And our purpose today is to focus on helping you take an inventory of what it is that you need to do. And my focus also is in the state of Illinois. If you're not in the state of Illinois, that doesn't mean that this is not relevant. It just means that as you watch, you should be thinking about how this could apply to you, as well as for, your organization in your state. If you have any questions, you need something that you should figure out, you can email me at ValerieFLeonard at nonprofitutopia.com, and we can think of ways that you can approach it. And you can even go to nonprofitutopia.com and book a session so that we can at least get a sense for, what your issues are. And Taki, oh my goodness, it is great to see you. You and I need to catch up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really, I miss you, fella. All right, so I can go on forever and a day talking about this stuff, right? But I want to get started, right? You are here to better understand compliance and what that means. And our theme is just checking, because we're literally going down a checklist, so to speak, and we are sharing with you things that you need. Again, whether you're in the state of Illinois or not, a lot of this will be relevant. And if you're not in the state of Illinois, it doesn't mean that I can't help you. It just means that we need to make sure that the information for your state, you're in compliance with. So we're going to talk about the things you should be in compliance with, not only at the federal level, but at the state level. Again, we're going to be talking about what you need to do right now to make sure that your nonprofit is in compliance. And when we talk about compliance, that sounds like a very scary word. It is a legalistic word, but basically what it means is, are you following the rules? Have you done the things that are required of you by your funders, required of you by your state, local, and federal government? And it is really a pain in the what to have to keep up with all of the paperwork, but it's very, very, very important. And there is a method to the madness as well as a madness to the method. All right. So before we get started with that checklist, I just want to ask you, did you know, right? Did you know that tax exempt organizations are twice as likely as individuals and corporate taxpayers to be late with filing annual returns with the IRS? All right. So this slide here, this will give you some indication of the magnitude of the compliance issue. And this is compliance just as it relates to the Form 990. So for every government regulator that's involved, every process that's involved, every funder that's involved, there could be a whole nother set of compliance issues. Again, compliance is basically following the rules, doing what it is that you said you would do, right? So in the United States, as we speak, there are 2.9 million nonprofits, right? And that includes nonprofits that are in good standing as well as those that are not. So of that 2.9 million nonprofits, 1.06 million, right, lost their tax exempt status just because they didn't file Form 990 for 3 years in a row. So if you don't file Form 990 and in any form, and so that could be anything from your postcard, your 990 EZ, your 990, um, any form of a 990, if you have not filed it for 3 years in a row, the IRS will automatically revoke your nonprofit status. So for the United States, of those 2.9 million, 100, I'm sorry, 1.06 million had their tax exempt status automatically revoked. And this translates into about 36% of all organizations over their lifetime have experienced getting their nonprofit status revoked. Some of them have gone through the process of being reinstated, but still, overall, 36% of nonprofit organizations have lost their tax exempt status just because they didn't file Form 990 in time. There are other reasons that you can lose your tax exempt status. It could be getting involved in partisan political activities. That could be a reason. Another reason you could lose your tax exempt status is because, the IRS is deemed that you're really not fulfilling your charitable purpose. It really looks like you're in business to enrich yourselves and, family and friends. In that case, they will revoke your tax exempt status. So there are a number of reasons, but we're focusing today on things like the 990. So compare people who are running nonprofits or nonprofit organizations having problems with their annual returns. 85% of individuals and corporate taxpayers, they file on time. So it's about 15% who are dealing with some outstanding tax issue where the IRS is coming after them. So compare that to tax tax exempt organizations, and you see there's a big difference. A lot of this comes not because people who are running nonprofits are, inherently corrupt. Most of it comes from what lack of knowledge. right? People think, oh, I got this nonprofit organization. I don't have to worry about paying taxes. So it's not even on their radar screen, to even be looking to fill out this paperwork. So if you're in the state of Illinois, and I would imagine the same is true for a number of other states, you would need to file your annual report with the Secretary of State, right? So right now, to the best of my knowledge, I didn't see the downloadable form on the website. They did share these instructions for doing your annual report online. So I have here at the bottom, I've got a link that you can go to this Illinois Secretary of State's office and go to the Department of Business Services, and you can go and follow the prompts and file your annual report. All right. So if you don't report on time, and I'm not sure how much time lapses, it's not much, but you can literally, if you don't file this little bitty simple report, and basically they're just looking to for information like, who is your registered agent, who is your board, right? So if you don't file this form, and I'm not quite sure what the time that lapses. It's not much time. You can have your organization dissolved. We're not talking about losing tax exempt status. We're talking about kaput, dissolved. You no longer exist in the eyes of the state of Illinois. And if you don't exist in the eyes of the state of Illinois, you certainly don't exist in the eyes of the IRS. There's some organizations that have been dissolved without knowing it because they didn't realize that they had to file this form. So, be very, very careful. Make sure that you file your annual reports. All right. Not every organization has to do a financial audit. If you look on my website, and when I say my website, I'm talking about nonprofitutopia.com. Go to the blog, and there is an article that has a little bit more information than what I'm sharing with you today. It's very detailed, and I got some information also from the Council of Nonprofits that speaks to who is required to file a financial audit. As a rule of thumb, if your organization has more than $750,000 in expenditures, you should do an audit. However, you may have a funder, be it a government funder, a private funder, they may require an audit for a much lower amount of money. So it's very, very important that you keep up with what your funders require, and typically and I guess it should be obvious, but it's not always obvious. Your financial audit is going to be completed after your first fiscal, well, not your first, after every fiscal year, right? You don't just do one audit and stop. So at the end of your fiscal year, you do your audit. You should also be doing your Form 990s and your annual report, financial report to your state. Alrighty. So the next thing we need to do is make sure that we're in compliance with all of our grantors. So again, if you're getting money from individuals, they may have some requests of you. They may want a status report. They may want to, and that report could be just as informal as a call. Thank you very much. This is what we're doing with our money. But at the minimum, you need to acknowledge that gift in writing so that they can, um, let the federal government know that they have made a contribution to you. They may have other requirements as well. So everybody who gives to you has some requirement, and you need to know what that is. So the federal government is going to have many, many requirements. Individuals, not so much. And the due dates of those reports, those status updates, those are going to vary based on who's giving you the money, how much money they're giving you. All right. So, as I indicated before, you need to file an annual report with the Attorney General's office. And that is true regardless of what state you're living in the United States. You're going to have to file a report with your Attorney General at the state level, and then at the federal level, you're going to have to do an annual report. Um, and and when I say annual report, I'm talking about an information return, which is your 990. So just think about this, like, as we file our taxes, we all have to do federal taxes and we do our state taxes. In the state of Illinois, you're going to do the federal 990, and then you're going to do the 990, I'm sorry, the AG 990 IL. So that is the equivalent of your state return. This is due 5.5 months after the end of your fiscal year. So if your fiscal year ends June 30th, then you'll be doing this, June, July, August, September, October, November. So you have until November 15th if your fiscal year is in June. So regardless of when your fiscal year is, you have 5.5 months to do this. And the reason why they have so long to do it is they also realize that you are probably going to be doing your audits, and that takes time to, get prepared for, and to get your management reports and all of that good stuff. All right. So again, as I said before, not only are you filing at the state level, you're filing at the federal level. So these are due at the same time, 5.5 months after your fiscal year end. And there are various formats or forms of Form 990, and you file them based on what your income level is. You can have the postcard, which really doesn't require any documentation whatsoever, or you could do, a 990 EZ, which doesn't require quite as much paperwork as your 990. All right. So if you go on to irs.gov, look under charities, and they have a whole section of the different types of forms that you can fill out, including the various formats for the Form 990 and, all the different triggers. All right, so this is very, very important. People don't really think about it that much, but you got to make sure that the records concerning your registered agent are up to date. It can cause a lot of problems if they're not up to date. So if you're in the state of Illinois, you go to the Secretary of State's office website and you can download Form NFP 105.10/105.20 if you have any changes, right? So your registered agent, that is the person or entity that is responsible for receiving all of your legal notices, all of your notices from the state and federal and local government. I have worked with people who have started organizations, and the person who was the registered agent, for whatever reason, was no longer with the organization. So in some cases, it could be the executive director who left, or it could be, one of the board members who left, but they did not know that they should complete this form. And then even worse, I've worked with people who not only have had a change in registered agent, but they moved a couple times. And for a combination of not realizing that they had to notify the government when they moved, not realizing Two, that they had to notify the registered agent, notify the government that the registered agent changed. For 3 years in a row, they did not file Form 990. They didn't think they had to, right? They're like, oh, we're a nonprofit. We don't have to pay taxes. On top of that, they had an attorney. The attorney didn't know anything about taxes and nonprofits. They had an accountant who knew absolutely nothing about nonprofits. And here they were keeping copious records, but they moved around a bit, about 2 or 3 times. They went through 2 or 3 registered agents, and that was a recipe for not getting the proper notices from the government. And before they knew it, 3 years had passed, and they'd gotten a threatening letter from the IRS saying, if you don't pay, if you don't file, you could lose your tax exempt status. And then on top of that, they were going to be assessed penalties and interest, about $10,000, which is significant for a startup organization, right? So be very, very, very mindful. All right. So for those of you who have employees, not only do you have to file for your payroll taxes, you have to pay them as well. And the penalties are extremely, extremely high for this. Again, you should go on to the IRS website, look up Form 941, look at the instructions and all of that good stuff. I have a summary of the forms and a link to the forms on our website, nonprofitutopia.com, in this article. But it's really important that you file Form 941 on a quarterly basis. And then you also do the same thing, at the state level. So you got the federal payroll taxes, and then you've got the state payroll taxes. And then if you live in cities that have payroll taxes at the city level, I'm sure there's some form that they have to fill out as well. But even if you have one employee, I would strongly recommend that you get a payroll service, because this stuff is not brain science. However, you really can get caught up, and organizations and businesses have had to close their doors literally because they got behind on their payroll taxes. And when you don't pay payroll taxes, you get penalized for not filing, you get penalized for not paying, you get interest on top of the interest, and all of that good stuff. And, the debt that you incur actually grows at a much, much faster rate than probably most most stock market investments. So really take those payroll taxes very, very seriously. Talk to an accountant, talk to an attorney to make sure that you're on track. If you're in the state of Illinois, go to the Department of Revenue. They've got all kinds of publications that you can download. But still, you know, even if you read that stuff, if you're not an accountant, I strongly, strongly recommend that you get the professionals to do that. I say that you read it so that you're familiar with what is before you, but leave that to the experts so you could focus on running your business. All right. So some organizations actually own property, right? So in the state of Illinois, in the city of Chicago, in Cook County, the process that you go through is extremely tedious in order to be exempt from paying those property taxes. You have to go through an appeals process, demonstrate how you're using the forms. Again, if you go on to our website, nonprofitutopia.com, I did a blog post that goes very nicely with what we're talking about today. And there's a whole section. There's a link to the forms that you need to fill out at the state level as well as the county level. And there's also a link to a couple pages that you have to go through that gives you a whole list of documents that you need to file. It's extremely, extremely tedious. So I say the first thing you do, hire an attorney. First thing you do after reading what's required, hire an attorney who is versed in real estate in Cook County in the state of Illinois. You also need to file a real estate exemption complaint with the county. And then you have to complete Form P-Tax 300 at the state level. And that's about all I'm comfortable with telling you because I am not a professional in this area. I just know that if you are looking to get exemptions on your property that your nonprofit or church owns, it's a very tedious process. And, that's something you should be aware of. And you need to hire the professionals who can help you navigate. All right. So the next thing you need to be aware of is filing for state sales tax exemptions, right? And this holds true for most organizations, not every nonprofit. If your organization is involved in economic development activity, the chances of your getting exempted from sales tax in the state of Illinois is almost zero, right? But for most everyone else, this is the process that you go through. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't try, but if your mission is about economic development, your chances are very, very slim. All right, so you would fill out this form, and you could fill it out online, and you would go to uh, the Illinois Department of Revenue, right? And I have a link here to this form that you can download, or you can actually complete a form directly into the portal. But at any rate, you need to fill out this form and then provide proof that you are a nonprofit and you're exempt from taxes. So that will be providing things like your mission statement, showing your IRS letter, showing your articles of incorporation, showing your bylaws. And there's a whole list of documents. And I believe you also need to show brochures. So they want evidence that you are tax exempt. And not only are you tax exempt, but you're actually active in the community, living your tax exempt purpose, right? You also need to register with the State Department of Revenue. And this is, again, for the state of Illinois. I would imagine the same is true for any state. Why do you have to do this? The state of Illinois has to keep tabs on who is doing business with them, whether they're for profit or nonprofit. So as you are, I don't know if you paid attention, but nonprofits need to register. They need to register with the Attorney General. They need to register with the Secretary of State. They need to also register with the Department of Revenue. So all of these different entities have varying purposes for registration, but basically you're letting all of these different entity know on their own various forms that you are in existence. You are doing business. Um, you are operating. You're raising funds, and they need to know whether or not you're tax exempt, because that lets them know whether or not to expect, I'm sorry, any revenue from you or whether or not you should be excused. And it also, puts you on their radar so that they can make sure that you're in compliance with all of our other laws. So you're going to have to do Reg 1. And ideally, this Reg 1 form should be completed when you start your organization. So when you start your organization and you are doing your articles of incorporation, once you get it back from the state, then you need to be filling out this Reg 1 form to let them know that, hey, we're in business, we're tax exempt, blah, 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 blah. You also need to register with the Illinois Department of Employment Security. There used to be a hard form UI-1 that you would fill out, and that form is used to determine what your share of payment into the pool for unemployment is. They no longer, from what I could tell, they no longer have that form available. They want you to fill it out online. So instead of having the form, when you go to the link that I have on the website, again, nonprofitutopia.com, go to the article Just Checking, right? And there's a whole list of all these different entities and links to the form. And if not to the form, then a link to these instructions. So here is the link to the instructions. This is what you will see. And then they advise you to fill out the form directly online. Again, the UI-1 is telling you, it's helping the state to determine how much you need to pay into unemployment. If you are a for-profit organization, this form should be done, as soon as you set up. I recommend that nonprofits do it as soon as they set up. Why? Because technically, or not even technically, um, legally, you don't have to do this form until you have 4 employees. But given that you're going to be so engrossed in your work, the last thing you're going to be thinking about is, at what point do I have 4 employees, right? So I recommend strongly that if you have not done this form, that you complete this form. And even if you do a payroll service is going to require that you do this form as well, because this is part of your obligation to the state. So they want to make sure that you're in compliance with everything that the state and federal government requires as far as unemployment insurance. All right. The next thing you need to be cognizant of is registering with the Attorney General's office. Ideally, and this doesn't always happen. There's so many times that this does not happen. But ideally, when you're starting your nonprofit, when you do your articles of incorporation, right? Once you get those back from the Secretary of State, you want to make sure that not only are you letting the Secretary of State know that you're in business, you want to register with the Attorney General's office so that they know that you're not only in existence, but you intend to raise funds and how you intend to raise funds. So the CO1 form is the form that you use to, register your organization. The CO2 form is the form that you use to speak to, what financial assets that you might have. So things, like income, expenditures, what you have in your bank account and that kind of stuff. That will be required. If you are a church or a religious organization, um, then you need to form to complete CO3, right? And that puts the state on notice that they don't need to bother you every year about filling out these annual reports. Again, the CO3 is just for religious organizations, but they will also, ask you to do your very first form, AG 990 IL, right? Okay, so um, are there any questions? Any comments? All right, it doesn't look like there are any questions or any comments. Just want to let you guys know that we are going to, um, in a couple months, have a course on launching your organization, your nonprofit. So we'll show you how to do it the right way and all of that good stuff. All right. All right. So seeing that there are no questions, again, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. I'm sorry I wasn't able to come on camera and make eye contact with you and all that good stuff. Hopefully, it'll be better next week. All right. So I shall see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.